You're listening to Learning is the New Working, a podcast about the future of workplace learning and the people who are helping define it. This episode is part of our series on the learning scientists. These are folks who are shamelessly stealing from science practices around them to help build and define the next generation of L&D. Today's guest is Nick Howe. He's a fellow peripatetic Yorkshireman and currently Chief Learning Officer and Chief Evangelist at a company called Area9 Lyceum. They're a Danish company with a 20-year background in applying computing to the process of learning. Nick trained as an engineer and he led learning and development worldwide for Hitachi Consulting before joining Area9 Lyceum, where his responsibilities also include customer advocate, product strategist, and learning scientist. He describes his mission as fighting the good fight against outdated, misused, misleading, and just plain wrong approaches to teaching and learning. In Yorkshire, I might reply with a, well, we'll see about that, Nick. We have a great conversation and we talk about his organisation's approaches to adaptive learning. We arm wrestle a little bit over the value of the approach and the best places to apply adaptive learning. We talk about the state of the L&D universe and the future of adaptive learning technology and why the Danish government believes that software for learning will be the next mega value creation platform. In our conversation today, you'll hear us reference the work of Anders Eriksson. I'm really sad to report that shortly after we recorded this episode, the father of deliberate practice passed away unexpectedly on June the 17th, 2020. I reached out to Nick before we published this week, and he wanted me to share the following statement with you. So, open quotes. I had the pleasure of spending time with Anders last summer, and he was delightful, entertaining, thoughtful, and inspirational. Anders was a champion for learning science, but more importantly, a champion of universal potential. That given the right support and effort, we can all do amazing things. His legacy has implications for all in L&D. Close quotes. We at the Learning Futures Group and everyone here on the podcast send our very best wishes and commiserations to the family, friends, and collaborators of Anders Eriksson. And we encourage you to go to the show notes and look at the materials and links that we've put into his work and his book.
My name is Nick Howe. Today is June 11th, and I am the Chief Learning Officer for Area9 Lyceum.
Welcome, Nick, to Learning is the New Working. Thanks for your time today, and looking forward to a conversation with you. First question, though, in these strange times, everybody healthy, everybody well in the family and team?
They are. Thank you for the welcome. I'm glad to be here. I'm somewhat in the lucky situation that it's kind of what COVID. I've been working from home since 2005. So other than not getting on a plane, work-wise, there hasn't been a huge amount of difference. Other things have got super busy. But yes, the family is all safe and well. We think we may have had it back in February, but we can't get an antibody test for love nor money. So who knows?
Yeah, great. Well, definitely strange times. We always start with a few quick questions, Nick, to sort of sketch out what you do for people. And I always start the podcast by asking people where in the world they live and work and why.
I live, despite my accent, and we were talking earlier, and we grew up very close together in the north of England. But despite my accent, I live in the south of Florida, in a place called Boca Raton, which, if anybody's seen Seinfeld, will know because that's where his parents were. It's also known as the New York with palm trees because it's where all the New Yorkers spend their winters.
Very good.
And why I live here was I grew up in the UK, spent the first 40 years of my life in the UK, always assumed I was going to end up in the US at some point. And it was a story of love. I met someone, fell in love. She was a Floridian. This is how I ended up here.
Nice one. That's good. That's great. How would you describe the business of Area9 Lyceum?
Good, but I don't think that's the question you were asking me. I think you're kind of asking me, what do we do? So we are, as the hundreds of others out there, a software company working in the education sector. And our raison d'etre is to help learners learn better and faster. And I'm sure we'll get into that as we go through the discussion, but we've been on a 25-year journey. The company still has the original 4 founders. We've been on a 25-year journey looking at what does good learning look like and how can we help that happen at scale.
Great. What Area9 Lyceum? Bit of an unusual name.
Yes.
Can you explain that for us?
I can. A combination of 2 things. So the Area 9 part goes back to 2 of the founders. So the company was, we operate at the intersection of cognitive science and computer science. And that's very much reflected in the 4 founders. There were 2 medical doctors and 2 computer scientists. And Area 9, if you Wikipedia it, you will see a reference to Brodmann Area 9, which is part of the brain. And it is most associated with things like short-term memory and self-awareness and various other bits and pieces, particularly to do with learning. So that's where Area 9 comes from. And then Lyceum, back in the day when Aristotle was teaching, the Lyceum was the name of the school where he used to teach. And ultimately, we might go on to discuss the software that we produce, but it's all part of the same story. So our software platform is called the Rhapsode, not Rhapsody, but actually Rhapsode. And the Rhapsodes were the epic poets who learned at the Lyceum. And the reason why all of that is important to this discussion is that they used to personalize their stories as they toured around Greece. And so we're all about personalization.
I love it. We've got Greek history, we've got neuroscience, we've got software.
Yep.
Man, this is my kind of
we
place.
We can go all over the place.
I love it.
Yep.
Great. What's your role? You're CLO, I think, but you also have a bit of a broader role.
Yes, I am the CLO. I'm the Chief Learning Officer. So from that perspective, I have responsibility for the development of the folks in the organization. But I really lead our corporate business. So we serve many different businesses, including publishing, regular K through 12 in the US education, so school through 18, and also universities. And I somewhat lead the corporate side of the business because my background is in corporate education. And I used to be a customer of Area9, and I know you're going to get into that in a moment, so I might as well just lead straight into it. I used to be a customer of Area9 back in 2013 as head of learning at Hitachi. I was looking at what we did, why we did it, and how we did it, and looking at was there a better way to do things. And I came across this small Danish company and was very intrigued and became a customer of theirs. And after 3 years, thought more people need to know about this. This whole computer science, learning science thing, this has got legs. And so I came over to help try and spread the message. So I'm chief evangelist. I tell stories. I work with all our clients. I try and help them understand what we do and help our developers understand what our clients need so that we can get the best fit.
Got it. Sounds like a super cool job, and I think you probably get a great perspective on what's going on in the learning space in general. And I hope we're gonna get to that.
I hope so too.
It might be useful, Nick, if you just tell us like the origin story of the company. And I'm sort of interested. You sort of computer science and medical doctors, I think, at the root of all this. How does sort of scientific thinking and science inform the product and how you operate the business?
Yeah, and I won't bore all the listeners with the complete history of everything, but I'll just touch on a couple of key points that I hope will be relevant to them. So our original founder, Ulrich Christensen, whilst he was studying medicine, was looking at the problem of why do doctors make mistakes in practice? And any of you that have looked at the history of medicine over the last 30 years or so will know that there were some landmark studies done around the mistakes that doctors make, and the number of people that were dying from doctors making mistakes. And so that started him on a lifelong journey about how can we help learners perform better on the job, and what is it about teaching that could help solve that problem. And that led him really down this journey of learning science, because, and again, we may get into this later on, there's a lot of practice that goes on in the L&D space across, the thousands and thousands of organizations, but much of it is not underpinned by any scientific rigor whatsoever. But actually, this is a solved problem. We've known for decades how people learn. Now, it's getting better all the time, and there's some fascinating new research, but we've known for decades how people learn and what good learning looks like. But it's been very, very difficult to put that into practice. Many people are never taught it. Our profession is one where people sometimes just end up in it, as I did, don't come to it with any kind of academic background, and so don't understand the things that work and don't work. And unfortunately, many of the things that seem common sense actually don't create good learning outcomes. And so I would argue, based on my experience of the last 7 years, that our industry is due for a long overhaul. So getting back to the origin story, it's really been a 25-year journey looking at human factors and at learning science and saying, why haven't organizations implemented the things that we know are absolutely going to help learners?
Yeah.
And how do we solve for that problem? How do we enable people without blowing budgets to create way better learning, particularly at scale? Right? We know that one-on-one learning, having a personal tutor, is a fantastic way to become much better, much more quickly.
Yeah.
But what the issue we've been looking at is can you scale that up to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands?
Got it. So you have this phrase, the intelligent tutoring system, and I think the key is in this notion of tutoring. And I think we talked before about Ben Bloom's 2 sigma problem. I think is what you're getting at, where we know with one-on-one coaching is an ideal way to transfer knowledge and help people build skills, but it's expensive in terms of time and treasure.
Yeah.
Can you describe the architecture of your product? Like, essentially, how does it work? What does it do in order to sort of get off after that problem of using technology to help tutor?
I will try. It is a...
we don't have a whiteboard. It's a bit of a flaw in this podcast system. It's kind of a go to the whiteboard moment.
Yes. But there are some very simple, basic concepts that are easy to explain in a format like this. The overall discussion would take hours because we've spent 20 years looking at how we solve this problem. But there are some very simple things. For any of your listeners who are interested in digging a little deeper, I am associated with the University of Central Florida, and there is an education researcher there called Eduardo Salas, S-A-L-A-S. And a few years ago, Eduardo published a research paper called something to the effect of The Science of Learning in Practice, What Works in Training. So if you just Google Salas, you should find that paper. And that's a great distillation of a whole bunch of things. And it turns out things that tutors naturally do, and we've looked to encode those into the platform. So, for example, at the heart of what we do is something called formative assessment, teaching by using problems, or rather adjusting the teaching process based on feedback from the learner. So